everybody. My name is Debbie Rosen, and I'm here with Lindsey Thoms. For those of you who just finished watching or came to the live event for this webinar, we're actually re-recording it because there was an issue with the recording. So you're getting a little bit more condensed, but hopefully our second run of this material, we're very excited to be able to record it for you. So as you may know, Lindsey and I are both owners of the StudyPro, and we are an executive function and study skills center. And we wanted to share something that we're very, very passionate about, which is helping you to better identify gaps in skills for your students around executive functions. And why do you want to identify those gaps? Well, we believe that only by identifying those gaps, we're able to fit the right strategies or match the right strategies to help students' executive function muscles grow. And so throughout this presentation, we want to help you better understand what the executive functions are, because they can be a little tricky to identify, and then also help you with strategies to kind of look behind certain behaviors and see where the executive function gaps might be. And then finally, to communicate with your students so that in a way that's more solutions oriented, and to, again, identify those things that are indicative of building executive functions so that we can water those seeds and have them grow further. So those three parts are what we're really going to be focusing on in the presentation today. And Lindsey and I will go back and forth and talk a little bit about how we get there as parents into more of a solutions orientation to build executive functions. So why are we giving this presentation now? Why were there 280 people that were interested in signing up? It's because we're really all taxed right now during COVID, online learning, all of the associated challenges. You know, we're really seeing executive function tanks that are low. And it's, when it comes to getting started, it's really not just about getting started on homework or the big things. Sometimes it's really about the little things. Getting started to get online, getting started to get dressed in the mornings, getting started to get online to another class and to pop open that file. Sometimes what we're finding is that, you know, the kids work so hard keeping it together all day that the other executive functions of initiation and inhibition and others are really challenged and taxed because it's too hard. You know, they've really been working so hard on just focusing throughout the day. So we're going to talk a little bit about what executive functions are, because again, it's that big amorphous term that we may not know specifically what that means. Now, in a big picture, executive functions are really about getting things done. I wake up in the morning, you know, as adults, we often have a plan for what the day looks like. We can backward plan to reaching the goals. We know maybe what materials we need to leave if we're leaving the house or to take. We might know how to remind ourselves of things that we might forget. These are all strategies that we use as adults to help us. If something happens throughout our day and it throws us off, we may know how to rein back in our emotional control so that we're not overreacting, or we may be able to notice that we're getting distracted and have self-monitoring skills to get back on track. But these are challenges these are skills that are not necessarily developed in students. Executive functions are developmental. So when we're born, we're not born with fully functioning executive functions, which is why kids don't know maybe what 10 minutes looks like, or they may not know to plan ahead when they're walking across the street and they may not look. So we as parents are the executive functions for our students. And what we of course want is to see that transference of the executive functions from parents to students. So Lindsey is going to be going through all of these that you see on the screen in detail. So don't worry about that right now, but just become familiar with those terms and then how they compare to study skills. So study skills are also skills that need to be developed and in many, many cases explicitly taught. But skills like time management, note-taking, active studying, self-advocating, test-taking, growth mindset, the understanding that mistakes are just another way of learning, which is a big, the growth mindset is a big area of focus for us. But they are used all throughout the learning process. When teachers are teaching, when teachers are assigning work, when teachers are assessing, And they help us reduce friction as we're going through that process in every single year of school, every class of school. And of course, we're expected by the time we're in college to have these pretty much down pat, not just the executive functions, not just the study skills, but also executive functions. We're expected to be able to manage our time independently, to initiate independently, to chunk and plan, actively study. So these are things that work together, executive functions as the base that allow us to use our study skills. So in other words, we will reach our goals if we can, for example, in the purple area, inhibit our attention so that we can focus on getting to that English paper and initiate on those math problems. We can have very high intelligence, but really be challenged with initiation, executive functions, other executive functions, and study skills. And when we start to see the challenges with our students many times is when that process element of school then overwhelms the content. So I may be really able to click through that worksheet in kindergarten, first grade, even sixth grade, manage all the content because it's not overwhelming me because I have very high intelligence. But let's just say now that sixth graders in eighth, 10th grade, maybe even 12th grade, I have a big history paper. I have a long-term project for science or English. I have multiple math pages to do. Now I need the ability to plan and manage and chunk and initiate. And that overall I'm not just able to reread that history chapter and just know. So I need to implement those active study strategies and things that are part of the process piece of school. And that's when we often see the challenges with executive function, because my kids were doing just fine until. And that's really where we see sometimes the challenge, and where executive function skills or gaps are more evident. So we know that strategies can fill the gaps, and we're going to talk a lot about what are examples of those strategies that can fill executive function gaps, and how we believe that parents should really be focusing on those strategies as ways to help students meet their overall goals versus just, oh, I'm so glad you finished your homework or got an A on that paper or, studied for that test. It's more about the how and exhibiting the fact that they have this strong base so that they can build, and as the content gets more and more challenging, they can build on that. So in summary of this, opening section, we really know that it's tempting for parents to think that maybe it's an intentional challenge. They're just not doing their homework because they just don't know how to chunk, or they're maybe lazy, or, they're not doing as well on tests because maybe they don't care about rushing. They don't care as much about the quality of the work. But really, we urge you to think about the fact that in most cases, the why is due to a missing skill. And as we were saying here on the right, it's really only by identifying what the missing skill is that we can fill it with the right strategy. And we do hope that as we go through this, you can identify some strategies that may be useful for your student. And then we can implement those and really water those seeds to grow those executive function muscles. So I'm going to turn it over to Lindsey and put myself on mute so there's no echo, to take a deeper dive into what executive functions really are and how do they show up in real life.
Yeah. And I think that was such a good point, Debbie, on that previous side, that it can be easy or tempting to jump to those. They're just not motivated. We're not big fans of those just or the shoulds, only because it doesn't provide the solutions. And this is what motivated us in how we are running the StudyPro, of coming from the place of, let's start with this understanding. And so first we have to start with, what are these executive functions? What can they look like? And so this first one is a big one that I think we're all seeing, especially now with distance learning. Initiation, and Debbie used some of those examples, like getting dressed in the morning, getting off the couch after you relax, any of those initiation things. But for a lot of our kids, it can look like also getting started after a break. So if you see your kids kind of binging their work sessions, they don't want to get up. It takes a lot of effort for them to even take a break to go to the bathroom, get some water, eat. Any of those might be because they literally do not trust their initiation skills to get started again. And I can tell you from many conversations with students is they can label that. When you're asking that, like, hey, what's the barrier? What's the hesitation to taking a break? I'll lose focus and I won't get started again. That's powerful when they can recognize what that is and what the challenge is, because then we can come in with solutions together. Okay, how can we leave ourselves a little breadcrumb when we take a break so we know what to pick up with? What can we start with? Maybe it's even highlighting the next question. Maybe it's like circling it if we're doing it on paper. Maybe it's just starting that sentence, even starting the word where you leave off on that sentence, leaving an S. So it's a little breadcrumb that can help them get initiated and start after a break. And this is why it's so important to know how important executive functions are to that foundation of the study skills, as Debbie mentioned, because we often come up with a solution for kids before really understanding the identification, the need behind the behavior we're seeing. So we might see students working at the last minute. So we think the solution is chunking. But if a lot of our kids have trouble with initiating, they don't see chunks as a sign of necessarily relief in that moment. If the challenge is initiation, they see those 10 chunks as, 10 times where I'm going to have to initiate. 10 times I get to disappoint myself, my parents, my teacher. All that vulnerability there. It's seeing, if I don't have the solution there, the chunk might not necessarily help. So I need the initiation strategy there, not necessarily just the chunking skill there. So we say this about initiation because we know getting started is hard, but getting started is also hard because we might be shifting, being flexible from one thing to another. So this might look like that. I don't like it when plans change. As we've all probably experienced, it can throw us off our game. That's kind of a phrase that we might use, is it feels like we're thrown off our game when things don't go according to plan. Now, as Debbie says, as adults, we might wake up in the morning and we might have a plan for a day, but I don't know if I could count on one hand any adults that I know that could say that their plans have gone exactly as laid out at all in the most recent times, right? That would be a huge success if we said our days went exactly as planned. That's not reality, right? And kids believe, though, that it is always 100% going according to plan. And when it doesn't, they can feel off. They can feel very uncomfortable. So that flexibility of having to shift and move things around is a strategy that we actually need to teach and apply there. And so something about giving warnings, we like to also remind kids like, hey, the shift from one thing to another is hard. So let's not set that alarm on your phone if your class starts at 12. Let's not set it for 12. Let's set it for 11:50. Not because it's saying you have to stop what you like to do, but it's just saying it's helping with that shift. So you might plan for that 10 minutes. What would that look like? That might be a good time to go to the bathroom, fill up your water bottle, get a break, stretch, do something that's kind of fun, a little like transition activity, makes you feel good. But when they know it's because you're teaching them a strategy for shifting and not it's because mom just wants me to get off my phone 10 minutes before class. Then it's coming from that solutions base that they know, okay, this is why it's hard. This is a strategy that could help make it a little easier in that moment. But to shift, we also might need these inhibition skills, right? How do we resist a temptation? Inhibition is about, I have a thought and I don't act on it right away. So I stop, I think, and I plan before I actually do. So when that thought crosses our mind, I don't have to take action right away. So this inhibition, I feel like, is almost a little bit unfair to talk about in times of COVID because we're all struggling with this, right? We're all looking for a little bit of dopamine fix, a little feel good in the moment, because it might have been fewer far between. It's harder to get some of those little feel good moments, some of those social outlets in time. So why it's very difficult is because we have to stop a preferred thing. We have to stop and think. So that's that reptilian part of our brain that likes to do. And then at frontal lobe, that part that's developing here, where those executive functions are held, that is developing now. So it's not there yet for our students. So we often think of electronics when we think of inhibition, the phones, the tabs, the computers, Fortnite, whatever it might be. But there's also, we're asking kids to inhibit and not actually eat something that they want to eat. Like me, it might be that chocolate cake. We are asking kids to inhibit when they have homework that they have to do. Some kids are really, it's challenging to not get started on that math homework when they're in the English class, because the thought is passing on their mind that says, I have to get that math homework done. I have to get that math homework done. I have to get that math homework done. So it's hard to inhibit. So it's not just about the electronics. It's about being able to stop and think and plan when we might take action on something and ignore those distractions. So again, what we want the kids to take away is it can be strategies can help support that. But often, as parents try to help with some of that inhibition, we might see this. We might see some emotional control needs being met. That it can be and it look like, okay, my computer dies. I don't have my charger. I often use the connection with kids that if my computer dies in the middle of a game and I throw my computer against the wall, that's not going to help me achieve my goal of getting back on my computer and going back on the game. Right now, my computer's broken and now I can't do it. So the emotional control, I don't want anybody to ever hear that it's not about not having emotions. It's not about even suppressing emotions. It's being able to recognize when our emotions are affecting our goals and what strategies can we use there. So it's very easy to recognize the more explosive or outward emotions that we might be seeing. They're throwing the computer against the wall. It's harder maybe to recognize some of those internal ones. If you see in that middle circle that I can get stuck on making things right or perfect, that would be our perfectionistic students who might be spending hours on a one paragraph written response. And you might have seen them do it before, and it might have seemed easy before. And why now is it because it's got to be perfect? And it might be that they need those emotional control strategies. And the key with emotional control strategies is they are most effective when they're preventative and not reactionary. So for that perfectionist student, you can imagine if in the moment you try to convince and reassure and get them to turn it in as is, it's not going to go so well. I got to do more. I got to make it perfect. I can find the right source. I can find the right quote, whatever it might be. Convincing in the moment is not very effective. But planning and reflecting on what are those triggers that might lead to those feelings of I have to make it right. I have to make it perfect. If not, I'm not going to get an A. And if I don't get an A, I'm not going to get into the best college. Then I'm going to disappoint my parents and I'm going to disappoint my teachers and everybody else who's around, and on and on and on and on. So reflecting in the moment, what are some of those potential assignments? Maybe let's pick one or two low stakes one this week and let's see what it would feel like if we just turned it in as is. Would it help if I set a timer and we just says, no matter what, when this timer goes off, we'll turn it in? And remind ourselves that the teachers are going to view this differently than I'm going to view this. And proactively planning for those opportunities makes it more likely that they can manage those emotions. Because as we often say, I don't think anybody in the history of calming down has ever calmed down because they've been told to calm down when they're feeling upset. And so I think we have said that to our kids many times before. Don't stress. Don't stress. It's going to be okay. Don't stress. It's going to be okay. What's going on in their brains internally is, how is it going to be okay? Why is it going to be okay? And that's where we can replace with some of those strategies and solutions for some of these other executive functions as well. So on this other one, this is what we can say, why it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay because we can use a strategy for our working memory. It's tough. So working memory is your ability to hold on to something and then use it. Hold on to a thought, a memory, something you've read, and then use it. So I call it for myself the what was I doing memory, because I think often we can imagine what it feels like to maybe be interrupted in our thoughts, that we were going to do something and maybe an email popped up and it got me off course. So then the working memory is, okay, do I remember what I was about to go do? Can I shift back over? What was I about to go do? And so what this looks like for our kids is sometimes they need repetition to remember things. Here's the assumption we don't want to make here, that they're not listening to us, or that they don't care about what we're saying. It might be a working memory challenge here. And this is what can neutralize that conversation. If you go in, I've told you 10 times, we might just need a strategy. to remember those things. And Debbie has literally seen me use this strategy. Sometimes I'll cross my fingers to hold on to something to make sure that I can and then go use that information later. But what we see a lot with kids is they read the directions, especially on a digital assignment. They read the directions at the top. They start to go scroll down the page. And by the time they get to the first problem, the directions have flown out of their minds. Now, here's the assumption we don't want to make. That you don't care about the assignment, you didn't read the directions even. It's just saying we might need a working memory strategy. Say it out loud to yourself. So what are we doing on number one? Let's repeat those directions out loud, maybe highlighting the key words. Also using screen sharing and having 2 documents up so you can have the directions always, no matter how far you scroll down the page, you can see those directions always. So that just is a little strategy so they're not taxing their working memory as much. Same thing with like a prompt. Always keep the prompt visual. It might be about printing it out, putting it on a Post-it, sticking it on your computer. So that's a working memory strategy that is not requiring them to hold on to that information when they need to use it. It's having it externally there for them to use. And then I'll say one more point about the working memory before I go on to the self-monitoring is working memory is taxed a lot because our assignments are posted in different locations. So if you hear your kids saying, I know what to do, that is true. That's valid. But it's a lot of information to hold on to. So then when they go down to write and do their homework for that evening, it's hard to remember, what was I doing again? I remember what my teacher said in class. I remember that it's posted on Google Classroom, but now can I put all of that together and then I go do that homework? So just a little nugget there that to remember it might be a working memory challenge there. And then this one is my self-monitoring one, because I just want you to imagine, take a homework assignment for the night. Think about the kid who might have had a lot of trouble initiating, right? We've asked them to initiate on that homework assignment. We've asked them to inhibit and not get distracted by their phone and not reach for it when they hear it buzz or ding. We've asked them to control emotional control, right? It's not good enough. It's not perfect. They're going to judge me. My parents are going to judge me. My teachers might. We've had all of these executive functions being taxed and challenged here. And now you're going to ask me to use my self-monitoring and go back and fix it, go back and change an answer, go back and redo. That's a lot to ask, to have them self-monitor when they've used a bunch of executive functions already just to get to that point of done. So this is what we often see from students. When they're done, they're done. So the self-monitoring strategy here is getting them to stop and recognize we don't want to self-monitor just at the end. That's a lot. We want to find little self-monitoring stop and check points along the way. So even before, a good strategy we're going to talk about later is about previewing assignments. As we're previewing assignments, let's just pick some good stop and check points. Let's just pick some places where we're going to self-monitor. And then when you get to see them use it and praise for that, the likelihood that that will reinforce it. We're big fans of not doing and reviewing on the same day, like a little bit of pause. If that paper is done, then reviewing it, even if it's about like an hour break, just take a break and then we'll pick back up on that self-monitoring, because it lets some time pass that self-monitoring and that executive function tank can refill. And then we might be more effective in using some of those strategies there. So when these next two that we're going to talk about, this planning and organization and materials organization, is what we traditionally think of when we think of executive functions, right? It's the ability to plan, see forward into the future. And so what you've probably heard a lot of your students say is, yes, I know about that test, right? I know that test is on Friday, but it's just knowing a due date. It's not planning. It's not taking that strategic approach for that test. I know that paper might be due in 2 weeks. It's not, and this is where we fall into the trap of reminders. They just need more reminders. Well, the reality is they might know when that due date is, but the due date doesn't actually help them plan and approach that paper, approach that test. So they need strategies for this. And so this is not just about planning in the future. It's also about planning in our head, organizing our thoughts, collecting, consolidating those thoughts before we go to use them. So it might look like that Papers might look disorganized. That's the very famous quote that we often see, that the feedback from papers might be it's disconnected ideas. Well, that they need a planning strategy. They need to use a mind map, a web. We are huge fans of things that don't feel permanent when planning. We don't necessarily love planning on something digital. It can feel final. We do like planning on things that can be moved around and shift, because that's what you do need for planning. So we like Post-it notes. We like whiteboards. We like things that can be shifted around. If you are doing digital, using something like with the Evernote and the cards can be shifted around and moved around, because it's fluid. Planning is fluid, and things happen and things change. But the takeaway here is that planning and organizing, it's not just about knowing what you want to do or knowing what you want to say. It's about having a strategy for getting it connected and consolidated. And then this last one is the really famous one when you think about executive functions, when you might first be learning about it. It's easy to recognize the messy kid. And I say that in very, very strong quotes here, because it's not the messy kid. It's the kid who needs strategies for their materials organization. It's not the forgetful kid. It's a kid who needs to have a strategy to remember to bring his calculator on Wednesdays. What they need here is a system that would work for them. And getting them involved in collaborating in that system is extremely effective. Right? We try to sometimes slap this kid. You have to use a binder organization. You have to use individual notebooks, whatever it might be. We're not part of that one size fits all. We have strategies and recommendations that we know work, but we want to get that kid and get them into that collaborative process of what kind of systems would work for you. Where are your frictions in your materials organization? And what you might see, especially recently, is some digital organization needs from your students. In their Google Drive, you might see one or two things. You might see a bunch of untitled Google Docs, and or you might see a bunch of copy of doc. So when they go to edit a document their teacher shared with them, they make a copy of it. But they need a system, a materials organization system for naming those documents, how to put them in folders and files. Sometimes we forget that we have to be taught some of these systems. Managing their inboxes. I have middle schoolers that have 2,000 unread emails. Middle schoolers, 6th grade. How are you getting 2,000 emails in a day and all the notifications? And the takeaway that we hope that both parents and kids have when it comes to materials organization is lower the stakes here for yourselves and for them. We're not looking here for perfection. Give yourself the permission to set aside like a day of the week to just have a reset day. That's when you say, okay, this day is when I'm going to go through my inbox, clear it out. This is the day that I'm going to go through my backpack and clear it out, my binder, organize it, my desktop, my downloads folder, whatever it might be. But I think we often back ourselves into a corner when we think it needs to be absolute 100% perfection and organization from the day one. Let's set up some systems and let's give ourselves permission to reset occasionally. And that word permission, I think, leads into this, how to be a kid's cheerleader, how to be our own students' executive function cheerleaders, how to be motivational here. And why I kind of get like a little excited tone in my voice, I hope too, when I talk about executive functions, is because it was really motivating for us. It was motivating for us because we saw the power of identifying this with ourselves and with our students helps find the solution, right? So what we want to do, how to be their cheerleader, how to be that motivational support system for our kids, is to first look for the need behind the behavior. Behaviors are communicating a need. So some of the behaviors that we might see, we're going to talk about missing work. I know we probably can identify with the behavior that we might see of missing work. And the reality is there might be many possible missing skills and strategies that might contribute to that missing work. What we don't want to do is jump to that assumption that it's because they're lazy or because they don't have the motivation, right? Look at some of these examples here. It's that initiation. I don't know how to get started, so that's why there's the missing work. I might have that working memory need. It's posted all over. The emotional control. I have all of those missing assignments halfway done. I have all those missing assignments 3/4 of the way done. But that emotional control might be keeping me from completing those assignments and moving on. And then, of course, the big one, that planning. I might know what I have to do. I might even know the due dates, but I don't know how to plan when I'm going to do it. So the takeaway there is there's just these multiple possible missing skills that we can strategize with. Same with the low test scores. right? It is a quick assumption that we might make is that they're not trying, right? And this often happens when we see them being able to do it on the homework. We often see this as teachers saying, they can do it in class. They're the first to raise their hand. They're the first one to share. They're able to do it on the homework. And then, so why are the test scores low? We don't want to assume it's because they don't care and they're not trying. It could be that they need this actual self-monitoring strategy. That I might be taking all this effort to get my test done, and then to go back and review it is difficult for me. Again, stop and check there. The inhibition, especially with distance learning and especially with tests online, inhibition is very much taxed, right? I want to get this test done because I want to get back to doing that preferred activity that I really like to do, right? And of course, anxiety, test anxiety is real. That emotional control is real, and that need for it is real. If I don't do well on this test, the same thought triggers can happen. I'm going to disappoint my parents. I'm going to disappoint myself. My teacher's going to think I'm not smart. They're all going to think I don't care, right? When I care so much. The problem is not that I don't care, it's that I care so much. Shifting, of course, students we can see get stuck on a problem. And all of these can be bolstered in a lot of different ways. Study skills, like working memory. Here's the reality. Note-taking is a very effective working memory bolstering skill there. Actively studying can help us get the content to stick. And then test-taking strategies, especially when we connect to the students, the test-taking strategies can also be an emotional control strategy. It can help us feel more in control as we're attacking that test, as we're going through that test. And so as I shift over to the next one, this not paying attention as class is a big one, especially with distance learning. We can even walk by our students if they're remote learning at home and we are saying, I can see they're not paying attention. So this is even for myself as a teacher and a teacher who has taught with remote learning, we don't want to believe it's because of the lack of motivation or the disrespect to the teacher. They just need some strategies here. They need some strategies to ignore those distractions. You're not in trouble here. Let's just talk about how we can ignore what's pulling your attention. What is the thing that's pulling your focus away the most? That working memory, there might be multiple directions being given in class at a time. So if they only do one out of the 3 things they're supposed to do in that breakout room, it might not be because they don't care. It might mean that they need a working memory strategy to track that there was 3 things. And we say all this because when you understand that there can be multiple reasons behind the behavior we're seeing, we can come with this solutions orientation approach. This is very much important to Debbie and I and all of the StudyPro, that we don't have all the strategies and solutions in the world. We come from this point of solutions orientation, that we're going to look for the need behind the behavior and strategize to problem solve there. So we'll have some examples here, and we're going to kind of focus a little bit on the initiation, because that's a big one that we're seeing already. So Debbie, I know, have you said some of these phrases that you see here on the screen?
Never. Always. So kind of pick up where Lindsey was the point Lindsey was just making. You may say to yourself, you saw all those different challenges in the purple slides about lower test scores, you're missing work. And you may say to yourself, okay, but what's the solution? I don't know the solution. And as she said, we may not walk away from this 1-hour webinar or all the other webinars or other research we're doing with all of the solutions. But one thing we can do is to try to have a more solutions-oriented approach. Why? Because, again, as Lindsey said, and we said earlier, we don't want to assume a problem and focus on the problem. The homework, have you started? What do you got to do? Because maybe they, again, do know what they have to do. They just may not know how to get started. So this is the anti-solutions example. It's focusing on the problem. So what we might want to do in an example, and what we do in our course as an example, is we really help kids to notice what are the challenges that they're having and bringing them into the solutions approach. What are some of the challenges that you're having? And this is a page out of our study skills course where we're asking kids, and they're really very, very honest with us. When you're having initiation challenges, what is that? What are you thinking? What's really happening? What's causing that? And, you know, it's really across the board. We see people Xing out many of these. I know my own daughter took it and she really gets concerned about things being worth so much, a big part of her grade. It almost is paralyzing for her. Sometimes they just don't really know what to do. And again, you can almost imagine the executive functions that those trace back to. But we like the idea of kind of naming it to tame it, of using the executive function words like initiation and being very specific about it and saying, you know, we're noticing that you are having some challenges with initiation. And, you know, not at the moment that they're having struggles, but maybe a little bit before that or later on in the day or a time that they're feeling a little more approachable, and saying, how do you think we can approach this challenge of initiation? And so while we, you know, can't teach every strategy about initiation, you know, we of course have a lot, but two of the really big ones that we can do as parents in helping them with the process and developing solutions is to help them make a plan and to build on-ramps onto the assignments. And so what we're trying to, one of the things we want to emphasize is the fact that just a list of work isn't necessarily a plan, or isn't a plan, period. A lot of times we'll see kids making, students making a long list of work, but that list of work can be very overwhelming. And it can just make them shut down more and just think, oh, you know, I don't really know where to get started. So we are very oriented to making a plan. And the example that I like to use is, you know, if you know that your work, for example, is dinner, making dinner, and maybe pre-COVID, you're even having friends to make it even more of a stressful situation, and you're not sure what to make, you know that homework is the dinner. But once you know that the homework is the spaghetti bolognese, and you've already checked what ingredients you have and you don't, it becomes a much more approachable task. That planning, even the littlest bit of planning that you just did, is an initiation strategy. And that's why we think key to planning, or we know the key to planning, number one here, is understanding the specifics of the assignment. In this case, instead of just math homework, you know, what specific page, what specific problems, and then you can go ahead and chunk it up if that's something you need to do, or start, you know, say, let's just do the odd ones on tonight if it's not due tomorrow, or at least this part of the work. We also believe in previewing the assignment. What does previewing mean? It really means actually looking at what the assignment is. A lot of times we'll find that because students haven't previewed the assignment, they haven't read the directions, they don't know how long the video is. We have kids that come into our homework center last night. I had two different students I was working with. One had 3 problems. We popped open those 3 problems to preview in our part of our planning process. And they were really big 3 problems, multiple parts for a science project. And it wasn't just, oh, there's 3 problems, that's it. And another one, it was 3 little problems, 3 quick questions that just had to find in the material. So that will help us understand, you know, how we should approach that. So previewing the assignment is a really big initiation strategy. It helps you get started because you can also then know where to start inside that assignment. And then alternating, because just like any other brain, any other muscle, our brain is a muscle, and it's important to start with something a little bit less taxing. So asking students, your student, you know, what's really, you think, going to stress you out tonight, or what's really challenging, it might be more challenging for you, and starting with something that might be a little less challenging. It can be high priority, something that's due tomorrow. Maybe it's emailing a teacher to get some clarification. Maybe it's those 3 small problems we talked about. And that's very personal, because obviously math may be really easy for one student and not another. So again, all of these are initiation strategies. Again, loving that word strategy. Hey, maybe we can preview this together. And as Lindsey said, be in the calm and help you get going. And another way of thinking about previewing is building on-ramps onto assignments. And it's really important to help students when they get stuck, if they'll allow you, even if they're having a really tough time, maybe it's later, just like, hey, you know, maybe we can look at it together. And I see that those 14 questions on your English assignment are really challenging, but, you know, this 3rd one here, maybe we can just reword them to clarify. So maybe as we're chunking assignments, it's not just, we're going to do an hour of this, an hour of this, an hour of this, or step 1, 2, and 3, but maybe it's breaking down a different way. So for example, rewording the question for clarity is making sure that we're really understanding or finding a way to connect with each one of those 14 questions. And chunk one tonight for this longer term assignment is just rewording and maybe putting a couple of notes in there. And understanding where to connect with the question is another example. So I was, again, working in our homework center with a student who had to write an essay, and the essay was about how do you show up? How are you going to show up for the school if you were to be admitted? And she was very specific about how she was going to show up in each particular type of class or subject, but then just got stuck. So how do you connect with that question? What does it mean to show up, right? Who has showed up for you in your life? Who do you think in the bigger world has shown up for the world? Oh, okay, I get it, right? So we find a way of connecting. Oftentimes there are clues right in the directions. What does it really mean to XYZ? Well, let's look that up and let's see how we can connect with that. And in math, science, other things, another example was really about maybe watching an outside video on a topic. It doesn't have to be only the video that the teacher has provided. So there's ways to create clues and to do other things to help really get these kids started. The big point takeaway is that the strategies that we are talking about here should be looked at not just as one-time events, but, oh, I really love how we used that strategy last time of connecting with the question or previewing, and how we were able to then chunk it up more effectively by looking just at the action words. And these are things that we can then water later because they do work. And we want to give kids things that work. And there are a lot of other strategies to initiate, but just to summarize here, because you can take a screenshot or this will be posted on our website, so you can take a look at it later. But the point is really just getting started in a small way. If we're going to take a break and we don't trust our initiation strategies, just highlighting that next place we're going to starting a problem. As Lindsey said, these are, just to reiterate the things she was saying, to help us get started. Combining one idea she had was, we are really love whiteboards. You don't have to have huge whiteboards. You can actually, I have one right here. You can use these small ones. I've seen so many students who were just able to put, the odd numbers in math and then erase each one as they finish. And it's so helpful for them to get going on their work. And it's just a great initiation strategy, a great perseverance strategy. Again, what's solution orientation? Find a strategy, fill the gap, erasing each one. I love how you did that. It was amazing you could do that. And then they'll start doing these things on their own. So really where we're going is that, we want to help, as I said, build these small little strategies to fill executive function gaps. Don't worry if it's executive function or if it's study skills, it doesn't really matter. We're building a very strong base. We're watering the seeds which means that we are trying to identify the solutions and then praise and help and praise based on the solutions, not the outcomes. So I'm going to turn this back over to Lindsey to talk a little bit more about this. And
yeah, no, I think that's the perfect example of saying that what we water, the seeds, is what grows. We don't want the weeds to grow. We don't want to say the unfinished assignment, the missing work. That's not what we want to grow. We want to grow them using an initiation strategy. We want them to grow using an emotional control strategy. So how we can do this as parents is, we sometimes, very well-intentioned and not with any kind of assumptions behind our language, have these little demotivational pitfalls that can happen with our kids. And it's not, I have used this phrase before. Do you have homework tonight? And the challenge here is, it's a yes, no question first, right? They can answer with a, yes, I do, or no, I don't. And that kind of ends the conversation. And what we want to do is avoid the gotchas that they can put them on the defensive. So when we ask, do you have homework tonight? We might just generally mean that. Maybe we want to go dinner. Maybe we want to have a special walk after dinner. So we were just trying to plan our rest of our evening. But what they hear is, my mom thinks I'm not going to do it. My mom got an email from my teacher about missing work. That's what might be going on in their mind. So what we want to say is something that opens them up to the dialogue and helps them kind of reflect on a solution. Planning, picking the first thing we're going to start with is a strategy and a solution. So what we might say is, what's the first thing you're going to get started with, right? What's something that would feel good to get off your plate? So the one, not a yes, no question, but two, it also gets them thinking about a strategy that they could use. If the goal is to have them reflect and maybe actively study for that test on Friday, sometimes we can default into just reminding them about that test. And so what we could ask them is saying, have you found Quizlet or note cards to be more effective for you? Maybe that can just start that conversation. So instead of a question that we might ask that says, did you study for that test? Because what they hear is, oh, my mom is afraid I'm going to fail that test. My mom thinks I don't know about that test. They do know about that test. They might not have a study strategy there. So what we might ask them, did you find anything interesting about the periodic table? I always wanted to know how to read it. And so what that does is it helps them join and get into the game with you a little bit about how to strategize and approach it. And for the next example that we're going to kind of refer to, things sometimes they go right. They got an A, right? We do want the A's to grow. We want more A's. That's fantastic. But we want to also add on there, praise that result. That's okay. But also have them reflect a little bit about what helped them achieve that A. What worked? What executive function skill did they use there? What study skill did they use there? So a question you might ask, you might say, wow, that's amazing. You got an A. What worked? What helped? How did you study? Oh my gosh, I got to remember that. That's amazing. That was so creative. You added pictures to your Quizlet that time? How cool is that? So again, with the next example is we're trying to grow the use of strategies here. So that's awesome, you finished. Stop and think here. We, as adults supporting our kids, we have to stop and think, are we trying to grow that they just finished? Yeah, that might be a big hurdle for them. Praise that. What helped get over that hurdle? Oh, you set a timer. You said you're just going to work for 10 minutes. Fantastic. So you see some examples at the bottom here are some praise-giving phrases that can help motivate our students, that can help water those seeds that we want to see grow. Oh my gosh, you moved to the dining room table when you were feeling stuck? I'm going to have to remember that. I was feeling stuck. Maybe I need to move out of my office. Maybe I need to try working in a different location to help me get going. So these are how we are being our kids' cheerleaders, help growing their future use of those strategies. And by doing that, when seeing us as that cheerleader here, then we can also collaborate with them and problem solve. So when we walk into our kids' rooms and we might see them on YouTube in the middle of class, and then it becomes you versus me. I've told you to get off that. You said you wouldn't. You promised you wouldn't. But here you are. It's because it's an inhibition challenge that's needed there. We need to strategize together on how to inhibit during class time. Let's plan that out together. So then it's you and me collaboratively problem solving against the challenge of inhibition for that example. So it's not that there's something wrong with you. There's not something broken within you that needs to be fixed. It's saying we need to collaborate on the strategies that are needed here. So think of that initiation, right? When they're not doing their work, you might see them on YouTube or scrolling on their phone or doing something else, getting distracted. Okay, so let's collaborate in a moment of calm to say, what are some initiation strategies that might have worked? They have gotten things done before, right? It has worked. What has helped? Let's talk about it and let's collaborate here on how we can build in some of those solutions with each other. And so I know we have this lovely picture here that's kind of a nice takeaway for our collaborative problem solving, and what we want to do is water those seeds of executive function we want to see grow.
Yeah, and we have to give a big shout out to Jonathan Dalton, Dr. Jonathan Dalton, who is the head of the Center of Anxiety and Behavioral Change, for this term of watering the seeds, not the weeds. Again, do we want to have the relationship with our students or our children that are about the weeds, the homework, the studying for the tests, or things that maybe, behaviors maybe that aren't where we want them to be right now? Or do we want to invest in what we know is a longer term solution, but one that really works, and a process of planting solutions and strategy seeds? Let's, at the time that nobody, that everyone has emotional control, and that we feel there's an opening to sit down next to our child, either emotionally or physically, and say, it has been challenging. it's really challenging. Let's open up the conversation about what the challenges have been and what do you think the solutions are, and just listen and validate that even though we may be really angry about the results and the outcomes that are happening right now, maybe not even in the big sense, but maybe small things that aren't getting done, we know that they probably are too, and they're really struggling with it. But I know that, having seen this over and over and over with students that have troubles planning and chunking and self-monitoring and all the other strategies we talked about, it is really important to know that strategies can be taught, and we can focus on those strategies, and and then by focusing on them, they get very excited about being able to use them again because they do want to please us. And Lindsey will share the story of my own daughter in particular, who really struggled with executive function and study skills. And of course, there's no big quick fix, but just the idea of really being able to organize her thoughts and knowing, and she actually coaches with Lindsey, and knowing that the solution one day completely on her own on a Friday night was to use a graphic organizer, kind of a spider diagram, to help her respond to a question in a more cohesive way. And what did she do? She called Lindsey on a Friday night to say how excited she was that she wrote this answer. And those are the kinds of seeds we want to water, because if we keep watering those, then the more cohesive answers will come, the better grades will come. And that's really the process that we want for you to invest in, and that we really believe works. And so what we are saying here, of course, is that we believe that there are missing skills that create friction, often in some aspect of school and work, and maybe obviously life with kids. But that if we can start focusing even on one area, maybe not just one skill, but one area, one bigger skill, and some strategies, and doing and working collaboratively with our students, then we're really going to they're going to start seeing us as more of a resource. And they may not always let us in. It may not be something that if it works once, it'll work again. But I know there are definitely times with students here and with my own children that they're hands off, talk to the hand, and other times they're very open to sitting down and working. But just knowing that we're not attacking them because there's a problem, but we're coming at it from the point of, I'd love to preview that and just see what that looks like, and maybe we can find a place to connect and get started on that together. And these are long-term things that will take time, because executive functions are developmental, and in the teens they're still heavily developing. We know that kids may have challenges with initiations regardless of the strategy all throughout high school and even into college. But the strategies will start building that muscle, and they will start implementing them because they absolutely work. And so we really want to build that foundation for learning and help the skills grow. So overall, we hope that you have a better understanding of executive function, of some of the strategies that you can use to help build those muscles. We are an executive function and study skills center. We do present at schools and in other organizations that these types of presentations. We're happy to do that for you. And we wanted to also share that we have an upcoming study skills class where we do review executive function and study skills. And we're very specific in helping kids to learn, what strategies they may want to work for, that will work for them, and where their greatest friction is in their learning process. And those are starting in January. If you're January 2020, if you're watching this after that, we do have a continuous calendar that is on our website. If you have any questions at all, I know there's a lot of specific questions about students. We will talk to everybody, and we talk to many, many parents every day. You can email us at info@thestudypro.com. Again, info@thestudypro.com. So thank you, Lindsey. Thank you for all of you who are watching. And we very much appreciate your support, and we hope that this was valuable for you. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks.